All right, welcome back, everybody, to Talk Openly. My name's Jac and Daniel. I am so happy to see you this week. Hey,
It feels
buddy.
like only yesterday that we were here, but it was a whole week.
It was a whole entire week with like all of our life stuff and other humans and other beings in the world. It's like it's been an entire week. Amazing.
It's mind-numbing sometimes how fast it ends up feeling.
Yeah, December 5th. Yeah. Um, Yeah, it was actually my partner and my anniversary on Sunday. Yeah, Sunday.
Nice.
Yeah, 7 years. And that was kind of amazing to reflect on.
7 years.
I know, yeah, that was like, oh my God. And I feel like
Good.
I'm just getting to know this person,
I was gonna say, it sounds like you guys are getting serious.
Right. Yeah, we're pretty serious. I like him. He's good.
I like it. Nice. Well, I'm
Yeah,
very happy for your guys' anniversary.
thank you.
Here's to another 7.
Yeah, cheers. Um, well, tonight we're going to be talking about the perfection of meditation. This is the fifth of the six paramita. And I know we're going to have plenty to talk about. Maybe not from like direct experience, but certainly from the masters that we're learning from. So I'm looking
Thank you
forward.
for clarifying that, Jac. I was feeling woefully inadequate for discussing the subject matter tonight.
Totally. Yeah, I know. Same here. Like I'm just like barely scratching the surface of meditative concentration. So got a lot of work to do. But I'm
Cool.
excited to explore it with you. This is
Same.
the exact place to do it.
Yeah, it is. I'm happy
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's felt like it was just yesterday that we met, but it's been a whole week. So what's happened? What's happened in your week?
So I've been distracted
Uh-huh.
uh, by many things. All kinds of stuff going on, and like pulling me like in every little direction possible, right? Between friends and family and obligations and work and you name it, right? It just feels like I'm like one of those gummies or something being stretched in all these different
Yeah.
directions. So yeah, it's kind of wild. I'm feeling a little bit on the tired, worn out side, but I'm super happy to be here. My I had a lovely Sunday. Actually, I went for a long hike with my oldest daughter. She and I don't get to spend a lot of time together, just the two of us. Usually, there's other people around. So we went for this long hike up in the Cape, not the Cape Valley, but anyway, out by Davis.
Yeah.
And I'm still feeling, and my calves are. It was a steep hike. It was like a 3 hour hike, and like the first half is climbing uphill the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's like, I feel like old, right? I had no idea that I was gonna feel this way for so long.
That's
Yeah.
great that you got out there though.
Oh, we had a
Got
lovely
to
time.
spend
It was
some time.
beautiful. Oh, there's nothing like going out into nature. It's like going to church or something.
Oh my gosh, it really is. Yeah, it's so funny you say that because actually in one of the groups that I facilitated today, sometimes we do these kind of like go around questions where everyone kind of answers a question. And one of the questions was, what role, if any, does spirituality play in your life? And this woman who really hasn't participated much in the groups is very much like responding to internal stimuli, meaning like that she's hearing voices and responding to them and all these things. She took a pause, she sat with it, and then she very clearly stated how like she just started talking about the beach. And she just being out on the water and walking along the water, and it was just so beautiful to see like this connection right between nature
Yeah.
and spirituality, and that you know this person, in a lot of for a lot of people it seems like she's totally gone, right? And I felt that way too.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, there's these little things that can kind of bring us back, and so it's
Mm,
just really cool to see that connection with nature and spirituality. So
absolutely beautiful. What a wonderful story. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way about getting out into nature, even just even I mean even sort of just like outside, right? just wandering around, even in a city, makes me feel a lot more alive, so to speak, grounded,
Mhm,
connected. Yeah.
mhm.
It's the best, good for curing depression and anxiety, that's for sure. I've always noticed, like there's this funny thing when because I have a dog that, I always have to take her out like first thing in the morning. And it's amazing to me. I'll wake up on the wrong side of the bed. I'll be all grumpy. Life sucks. It's terrible. No motivation. But I have to take this dog out. So I get outside, and as soon as like the door is open and I'm outside, I'm a different person. I'm a completely different being. I'm not the same person I was milliseconds before while I was inside. And then by the time the walk's done, I'm grounded, connected, feeling good, alive, generally happy,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, it's
yeah.
amazing. And how great that, you have this being who kind of, is forcing you to remember those good things.
I am super grateful to all of the beings, human and other, that helped me along the way. I
Yeah,
don't always appreciate it in the moment, I don't always remember to have gratitude, but upon reflection, it turns out everyone that I've been meeting along the way here in my life has been helping me out in some way.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
sure thing. I
Exactly. And
know.
my meditation practice is good. It was interesting though. This might be TMI, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I tend to get up pretty early for my meditations, and today was no different. I got all set up and was like doing some preliminary practices, and I was like, oh man, like something, I like my stomach, it doesn't feel so good,
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so like I was like, well, whatever, like it'll calm down in a minute, And so I was like moving along, and I kept sort of like ignoring it. And then finally I was just like, oh
I gotta
man,
do this
like
thing.
something is not okay there, right? Like, and I literally was just like, oh, well, it doesn't matter that I woke up and I intended to sit in meditation right now. This is not conducive to meditation. It's clearly going to be distracting. So
Right.
I just went and laid on the couch for a little while and pet the my girlfriend's chihuahua.
Oh,
It was chihuahua meditation this morning.
yeah, that is fair.
Yeah, yeah.
No, and you're
Sometimes
right.
you gotta like, it's important, right? Like we
Yeah.
talk about, not to push too hard if the situation calls for a little bit of softness and flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and what you're saying I think is right, that there's some conditions that are just not conducive to meditation.
Yep.
And we are fortunate to have a home where we can have a little corner that is our peaceful, quiet place. And we set up that place so that it is like the right conditions
Yeah.
for practice. And so, if there's something going on, if there's, a fire in the kitchen, or, a very upset stomach, like we've got to take care of that first.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. But overall, things are moving right along. I think, yeah, it's good. Good stuff. I think tonight's topic is could not be more appropriate for me. I've been meditating off and on for I think about 7 years now, something like that, and working hard to develop a daily practice and all of that. And I sort of like I know this is wrong, but some part of my egoic identity is even wrapped up in meditation and
Yeah.
meditating. Um, and I oftentimes still sort of lose sight of what I'm doing. Like, wait, what's this about, and why is it beneficial? Like, don't get me wrong, I get the basics, but
Right.
like, I kind of just like forget about it.
Mhm,
Like what
mhm.
exactly I'm doing, and sometimes it feels a little bit even rote. You know,
Yeah. Yep.
and so yeah, like it's good. I'm so happy that we're going to be talking about the perfection of meditation tonight. Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's a lot of what I'm kind of encountering as well in my
yeah.
training. And yeah, that kind of rote quality where I'm getting up and I'm doing the thing. Um, but there's a way that I'm not engaging with the sacredness
Oh yeah.
that, really brought me to the temple, and has given my training a lot of life, right? That's kind of like the wind that, we've talked about. And so, yeah, it kind of just, yeah, kind of trying to parse out like where do I connect with the sacredness, and how can I, you know, yeah, draw myself out so that I'm, connecting with that. Because I think sometimes, I get in this rut where, I've my whole life and many lifetimes, I've been trained very well to expect things to just come to me and fix me. I
Oh,
think uh uh my training in spirituality in this life started out very much with that, there's this creator that's gonna, be able to, do miracles and and do everything for me if I just, kind of say my prayers and whatnot. And so I kind of see that that's a little bit that's happening, where I'll do like tar practice, or even just the preliminary prayers.
yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, I'm just trying to get something out of this, and that's not the engagement that
Uh,
I want. It's got to be a relationship rather than like
yeah, yeah.
transaction. So
Uh,
yeah, it's interesting though. So yes, I think the topic's going to be perfect. But yeah, otherwise I'm doing okay. I feel pretty exhausted. Yeah, similar to you, I'm being pulled in a lot of directions. But it's good. I love my job. I love what I do. Feel really engaged with it. Um, yeah, I did want to mention I started watching this show, which, TV is problematic for me in various ways. I don't watch a lot of TV. I'm going to give myself some credit there. But anyways, I started watching this show called The Deep End, and it's about basically this cult that is started by this person, Teal Swan, and she's kind of like this uh, wellness guru, kind of like not trained in any professional way to do mental health stuff, but is very much like trying to heal people's trauma through things that are very scary, like and kind of problematic. Um, and it's so interesting to kind of watch. Like I'm watching this show with the mindset of like, how did I get to the temple instead of like wrapped up in something like this?
mm,
And so it's been really interesting, like to kind of dissect, like, you know, our lineage and our training is so very focused on ethical behavior, not doing harm, really doing as much as possible to like prevent harm. And part of that is that our teachers are vetted by other teachers. They have like the whole training is mentorship. And here comes these people like this person, Teal Swan, where they're just like they're their own person. They're coming up with this stuff, and they're telling people that they're right, that they're like the most advanced people in the world.
mm,
And it's terrifying. It's terrifying, like this incredible narcissism that is on display in this show. And people really get wrapped up in it. And I can see how, like, um, when I was first working on my recovery, both like, mental health and substance use and whatnot, I had almost this kind of like nihilistic, um, like, oh, well, I got through it, so other people should be able to get through it. And like, I'll like kind of beating, like both beating myself up and beating other people up. Like, oh, I just need to work harder and they
oh,
need to
right.
work
Yeah.
harder.
Yeah.
Like I've put in all this work and gone through scary shit and like worked on myself, and I just need to keep doing that, and other people should too. And so I can see how like that kind of mindset could get wrapped up in this kind of cult vibe where it's like, um, yeah, these people who just believe that, this person is going to be really hard on them. Um, and that they're just not doing enough. Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch and to kind of compare, like, just like the glory of our teachers,
Yeah,
and their
yeah,
deep, like deep compassion, and that they will be hard on us, but out of just like complete, like knowing that, like we can do it, and they're not going to push us beyond where we're capable, and what we've learned so far. So anyways, it just like brought up a lot for me. I've been thinking so much about it, and like so grateful that yeah, I had at least some awareness to kind of follow a path that has
yeah.
been laid out rather than one that's just been created in a few years. So
Yeah, no, for sure. I hear you on that. I think it's interesting. There was a little bit of a theme that I picked up on there, between the show and this sort of wanting something, just to get something, right, out of whatever, a particular practice. I've been reflecting a lot lately on the nature of, like, exactly sort of what you talked about my, like, my upbringing and my expectations around spiritual practice. And I recognize actually this deep yearning that you and I, we've talked about it before, but it's really been sort of like lingering lately, that there's this deep desire for something outside of me or someone outside of me to make to cause the transformation, if you will.
yeah,
I want somebody to just do whatever you need to do. Just beat me into shape, right?
right,
Tell me I'm a bad boy, or give me some strong rules, or some type of external discipline, or whatever. Like, there's this recognition of wanting, for example, like, authority, or like a mommy daddy sort of figure that knows everything, is omniscient, and can guide me along and tell me what to do and what not to do, and cause me to behave certain ways and whatever, right? And that's just magical, wishful thinking. And I
yeah,
understand how I was conditioned to become, to have those kinds of thoughts and feelings. But what really strikes me with, at least my own personal experiences with our teacher, is like, he just absolutely refuses to do that for me.
yeah,
you know
yeah,
one
yeah,
time one time I remember we were sitting in some kind of a meditation thing. It might have been a recovery meeting, and I remember just being like, I just want you to, like, just jump out, like, while I'm asleep or whatever, and just knock some sense into me, right? Like, why with all the teaching stuff, right? Like,
right,
why do I? Because it, like, you pointed out earlier, it's actually this relationship, right? Because it's tempting to say, oh, okay, so there's nobody out there, it's me then, I have to do this,
right,
right?
right,
And there's like, and that's another sort of weird sort of extreme that people fall into, this sort of like, there's nothing outside of me, I'm going to
right,
do it with through sheer, willpower and force and all of that, right? And people hurt themselves that way, as they hurt themselves on these, both looking for something outside and thinking that it's entirely inside, when in fact it's relational, right?
yeah,
And we're very fortunate to have the teachings and the teacher that we do, and that we're able to relate to it, because I know for, many parts of my own life, and many people, they are unable to relate to such teachings in a beneficial way, I think, just
yeah,
because of
for
where
sure.
they are, right? They can't
Yeah,
hear it, they can't see it, can't meditate on it.
right. Yeah, yeah, I've been thinking about that with I guess I'm noticing, like, how different people in my life uh are probably, well, I don't want to say probably, but like, yeah, just likely not going to engage with dharma, in their life,
Right.
or at least like in
Mhm.
a, kind of direct way. And I think the evangelical in me is like really upset about that. Um, but also at the same time, like, I'm reflecting on, well, okay, that's not the part of their like karmic journey right now. And also, like, yeah, just be grateful that that I have this opportunity, like,
Right.
I don't need to try and like get everyone to be doing what I'm doing, like we've talked about that before, where
Yeah.
there's this kind of like um yeah, wanting to force like my spiritual practice on other people, that like, oh, you should be doing this, it really works, you know.
Yeah.
um but yeah, that never works to try and do that. But yeah, to instead, like, I've just been reflecting on like, wow, I'm, you know, I'm really glad that I get to do this, you
Yeah.
know. And yeah, and it's okay. Like,
Totally okay. Totally. And the more that you work on it and work on, yourself and walking this path on your own, the more likely that you'll be able to guide or nudge people along the way. I'm not saying from an evangelical point of view. I just mean,
right,
just sort of through the power of your example.
right, yeah, yeah, definitely. That's always been the most powerful thing for me, you
Think
know.
about how many lifetimes we spent not engaging with the Dharma.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
ourselves, right?
oh
Like,
yeah. Yeah, I know. And even, you know, in this life, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, you know, with meditation, they're really like, oh my gosh, it just feels like there's this barrier in my mind. Like, and I'm pointing up here because, you know, it feels like there's a tension, you know, in my physical mind, brain, or whatever. But yeah, just this like disconnect I feel in my everyday life, even having met the Dharma and like working on ethical behavior, which I know like ethical behavior really helps clear the mind, you know. Even when really kind of like starting to get into this and on this path, like I still feel this just incredible disconnect from like the reality that I know is there, which is that I'm gonna die. You know, I'm gonna die. I really need to work on this like opportunity right now. And you know, of course, every day it's like it just goes back to I'm, you know, doing my life thing. It's
yeah,
just gonna continue on into eternity. It's what it kind of feels like. Um, but I know like I'm it's sounding like I'm being hard on myself, but I'm actually feeling quite gentle, and loving, and knowing that like as long as I remain on this path and continue the effort, like um that barrier, whatever feels like is there, I'm gonna have a different perspective on it at some point. Not saying that it's gonna completely go away anytime
yeah.
soon, but I do know that there's going to be a different perspective, a shift on it.
For
Yeah.
sure. I think like I like the analogy or the metaphor that Lama uses about, there's this big like paper,
Yeah.
barrier, if you will. And then you just pinprick it away,
Yeah.
right? A
Can
little
pick
bit
it
here, a
away.
little bit there, a
Yeah.
little bit there. And then before you know it, there you go. No more
Mm-hmm.
barrier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where's like the fire, like,
Mm, mm,
the torch thrower, torch
right?
down the paper.
I like it. I think the torch, just to borrow a metaphor from a painting that's related to the stages of meditation, I think the flamethrower is known as effort.
Effort. Yeah. Got to really put it
No,
in.
there's well, I might bring it up tonight, but the stages of the path, or, it's like a drawing of a monk and an elephant and a monkey on the path, and this is stages of shamatha.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there's like a fire, a flame that's really big in the beginning and gets smaller and smaller along the way. I'm pretty sure that flame, that fire is effort. So when you said flamethrower, I was like, oh yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah. I'd love to. I'm gonna, yeah, remind myself of that image. Yeah, that'll help. Oh, great. Well, I think, you know, a great start to talking about meditation would be to check out some Lojong, which is
And
another
Loja.
form of meditation in itself. It's kind of like a contemplative meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Daniel has pulled up the random Lojong slogan generator, which you can find on lionsroardharmacenter.org. And decided last week we think it might be the only random generator of Lojong, perhaps in the world, would you
It
say?
could be throughout all of time and space, and
Oh,
it could be the only random Lojong slogan generator to have ever existed.
that's pretty rad, gotta say.
Yeah.
Good job, Dirk, again.
Yes. Shout out to Dirk. Good job. All
Well, let's
right.
check it
So
out.
let's do it. There's a button. I'm gonna push it. Let's see what we get.
All right.
Oh,
Ooh, oh
oh,
gosh.
okay.
This one's hard for our show. It's so this is number 58. It says, "Don't be like an open book." I'm really curious about this one because I don't remember seeing this one. So the translation must be different from the Lojong that I have. Um, but Trala Kyabgon says, "We don't need to display every passing emotion as if some kind of drama were going on every minute of the day. That approach is often confusing for other people." This Tibetan phrase literally means letting everybody know whatever emotion we are feeling. Interesting.
Don't wear your heart on your sleeve.
Well, I wonder if it's like, so I think, at least from what Lama has, I feel like I'm learning from Lama, is that we want to be transparent, right? And transparency also helps us connect with other people. Yet I think what this is saying is that maybe we don't want to do it for every kind of like passing moment, right? Because like during a day, how many like wild emotions just kind of fluctuate, um and that we can get
Yeah.
pulled away by.
Yeah.
uh
I was just talking about this
yeah,
very thing this morning. It's interesting is that, we all kind of know people who are in fact quite dramatic, right? Like where you see the acting out of whatever thoughts or whatever feelings they're having in the moment, whatever it is. And it does oftentimes seem sort of like dramatic, right? It seems like it's, and that actually there's something somewhat attractive about those kinds of people. Like we generally kind of like people that are like, very lively and vibrant with their emotions, or angry, and then they're loving and happy and kind of over the top. And I think that to me, the suggestion seems to be a little bit along the lines of like, of course, we want to be mindful of our emotional states. That's
yeah,
important. To be aware of what we're feeling, that's very important. But I think that if we have that sort of awareness, we don't necessarily need to be putting on a big show, right? We don't need to display
yeah,
it to everybody. If someone were to ask us, or if we felt like it was skillful to
right,
share how we were feeling in the moment, there's perhaps, maybe using nonviolent communication or something like that to share how we were feeling. That could be skillful, but this sort of like constant neurotic, like having to be hot and cold all the time for the benefit of other people, I think that's the kind of crap that is saying not to do.
yeah, yeah. That's pointing out that oftentimes if we're really caught up in every passing emotion, it's probably because we're coming from a self-centered uh place
Yeah,
rather than thinking of others. So if we're just kind of
yeah.
constantly caught up in our emotions, then we're not thinking about other people, um which can be confusing.
Well, also, it's not just that, it's also, I think, this being carried along, right?
Yeah,
Talk about being distracted. It's
right,
the opposite of concentrated meditation, right? It's the
yeah,
opposite of being present and aware. When you just, some raging moment, some reactive, something takes you and you want the whole world to know, right?
right.
I think a good example of, well, never mind. I know people like this.
Don't be like an open book. Well, and I think what's really helpful to remember too is like, um yeah, sometimes if we're able to just kind of shut up a little bit
Right.
with someone, like that person's gonna feel like a lot safer in that dynamic. Like if I'm just kind of like spewing every kind of given thing that comes to my mind, like That's kind of a scary interaction.
That's right.
We can
It's
just
sort of
say like,
like the,
actually, it's
yeah,
not that important. So I'm just gonna like
right.
shut up and listen.
I
You know?
think it's like that, the British subway thing, saying mind the gap,
Mm,
right? I think it's like that. It's like, yeah, okay, so you become aware of a particular fleeting emotional state, and you mind the gap between that and the reaction. And then you can sort of selectively choose whether or not you act on that emotion or display it or whatever the heck it is you're going to do. But this sort of reactive, compulsive dramatization, acting out
mhm.
of whatever we're feeling, that's getting like caught up, right? Talk about being distracted. Like that's the ultimate form of distraction.
Yeah, this seems to definitely be kind of in the vein of right speech
Yeah, it
and
does.
right and mindful speech, knowing when and what is helpful to say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I love the colors of this tanka here. Um, and can we read the little caption below? So preaching Shakyamuni. Um, and yeah, it's just this really beautiful painting of Shakyamuni Buddha teaching the Dharma. There and if you come onto the Lojong slogan generator, each time you'll get a slogan with a beautiful painting or artwork. So check it out. Great. Well, I'm really glad we got that slogan because I don't think we've seen that one yet, and that was kind of
Oh,
fun.
I like it. Practical.
Yeah, super practical. Well, let's get into it, Daniel. So the perfection of meditation. This is our fifth out of six paramitas. Um, and this is one where I definitely I feel like I have a little bit less of an understanding. Um, but I know we're gonna explore together and learn a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I feel sort of woefully inadequate, but like you said, we have some excellent masters that pointed the way for us.
For sure. And what's interesting is that just like the last, four paramitas that we've talked about, when I actually approach like the texts about each paramita, it ends up being somewhat different from what I expected it to be. So
Oh.
Shantideva in chapter 8 of Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, um, he talks about the whole chapter is dedicated to the perfection of meditation. And so I thought there was going to be a lot of discussion around what meditation actually is, like what sitting meditation is, all of that. But turns out the basically the entire chapter until like maybe the very last two stanzas is about what can get in the way of a meditation practice and of developing stability.
Yeah.
And so I found that really interesting that like so much of the perfection of meditation is actually about being mindful of distractions in our direct environment and what we're doing instead of like the actual training itself. So
Yeah.
I thought that was like fascinating and challenging.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that I to a in a to a large extent, my meditation experience so far has been the very, very early sort of work to do to deal with these distractions, right? Like that's still what I'm up to, right?
Yeah.
Years later. Even though there are sometimes, what's interesting about the sort of like the different levels of meditative states is that it's not totally linear, right? Like there's times where I sort of have a particular meditative state and then I'm like, oh, like, wow, whoa, that's amazing, there's a hole poked in that little, in that paper or whatever, right, the boundary. But then I sort of like digress a bit, or I fall back a little bit and back into this sort of meditative state that's characterized by a lot of distraction, right?
Well, and I feel like Shantideva is not even necessarily talking about distraction within a meditation, like formal meditation,
No,
but
I don't
like
think so either.
distraction in
Right.
life itself, and
Yeah,
how that's going to impact our willingness to engage in meditation at
that's
all.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like that was surprising to me. I mean, and, you know, and of course, once I got into it, I was like, well, of course, that makes so much sense. Like what we are doing in our, you know, everyday life post meditation is going to be our meditation.
Right.
You know, like that's it's gonna show up. Um, so yeah, of course it makes sense. Um, and you know, I feel like Shantideva in his so like direct and and somewhat bombastic at times style, like he's always just saying, you know, I want you to be liberated, you know, like I want you to get this.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna drill it in because I want you to be liberated.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's hard to read, to be honest, you know, where I really feel that kind of like twinge of like, oh shit, I'm totally like still obsessed with like the eight worldly concerns, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
always like, even like sitting in my meditation, I've noticed oftentimes I'm thinking about like what dessert or like bubbly water I might
Hmm.
have like
Yeah.
after my sit.
Oh, yeah.
And when I really think about that, I'm like, oh my God, what
Right.
kind of like
Right.
bullshit are you doing? This bullshit. It sucks. It sucks. Like what you're doing sucks right now. You know, like it almost hurts, right? To be like, I'm spending like this sacred time thinking about bubbly water. Oh my
That
God.
is, but that's exactly it, right? Is that we are like that's the situation that we find ourselves in, is that there's all these like silly, I mean, when we really like just stop to look at the chatter of the mind, like what's going on in there, it's not just like mundane, it's ludicrous, right? A lot of it is silly and nonsensical and meaningless, pointless, right? Like I couldn't, I was laughing when you were talking about this because a couple of mornings ago I woke up, you know, I'm sitting there, it's freaking early in the morning and I'm meditating and everything is peaceful and calm. It was great, it was beautiful. And then, you know, a little ways into my meditation, I remember that there were some cookies on the kitchen counter, right? Like somebody had baked cookies or something, and they were. I knew that they were there, and all of a sudden, I was like hooked and gone. I was
Yeah.
thinking about the cookies, and you know, and then and the same thing as you. I'm like, oh my god! I came back. I'm like, what am I doing here, right? Like it's crazy. Like that's just like that's my monkey mind doing its thing, running away, right?
Yeah.
And so and it is sacred to calm that mind, to tame that mind,
Yeah.
right? Because this path of liberation that we're on, it's one of taming the mind. The mind is wild and crazy and sometimes a little bit silly, right? And oftentimes hungry for cookies, or you know, at least mine is. And
Yeah.
so, you know, like that's where we, as Shanti Davis says in very first, can I read the very first verse of
Please
chapter
do.
8?
Mm-hmm.
He says, after cultivating diligence, set your mind to concentrate. For those whose minds are slack and wandering are caught between the fangs of afflictions, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the afflictions are many, right? Everybody has their own kleshas. Everybody's dealing with their own thing, right? So in my case, a sweet tooth, right? I reckon
You too.
whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, we all have it, and so it's a root cause. We think so. The problem is not that cookies exist or that
Right.
bubbly water exists. That's fine. The problem does isn't even that that I'd like one. That's not
Mm-hmm.
a problem either, right? It's my relationship there and like what I hope to get out of that whole thing, right? And this
Right. Yeah.
desire to reduce my stress and to get some happiness, you know, get a little fix, you know, and then just to witness how that it's impermanent and it just doesn't do what I want it to do,
Yeah.
right? and we just
So
keep
disappointing.
it's so disappointing. And you know what's really disappointing, Jack? Here's the disappointing thing. Is not just that it happened one time I was sitting and meditating and I caught myself wandering off about cookies, but that's going on constantly, day in and
Constantly.
day
Yeah.
out, right? And
Yeah.
no matter how much training I have, no matter what I'm doing, it's still like heavy. There's still a lot of mud. There's still a lot of dust
Oh
covering
my
this thing.
gosh. Yes. Oh yeah. I think that's what I mean by the barrier in my
Right.
mind in some ways,
Yeah.
where I think I'm through, like, developing this paramita of meditation where I'm at. I'm just starting to see how much sludge is in there, and,
Yeah.
like, feeling pretty disturbed by that. That it's
Yeah.
like, when I first came to the temple and started meditating, it was like there was all this lightness. I was like, "Oh my gosh,
Hmm.
this is amazing. I feel calm," And and I think as we deepen our meditation practice, it's like, Lama has this metaphor of, we have this dimmer switch that's just slowly going up, and we can start to see all the shit that we have in our hoarder mind, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, so I don't think, like, it was ever that like when I first started meditating that I was like, farther along in the training, right, than I am now. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
It's just that now I'm starting to see how much is there. Um, and I really hope that that doesn't, like, prevent people from trying to, develop a meditation practice. It's actually fascinating,
Yeah.
to start to see some of this stuff. And I think, like, when those kind of moments happen where it's like, oh my God, there's the cookies again. Um, it can be fun. Like, it's funny, right? It's kind of like,
Yes.
oh my God, this is wild. But my brain just, like, automatically, and even when I try and, like, come back, there it is again. Or it's
Yeah.
like it comes in a different way where it's like, oh, but what if someone else in the house gets the rest of the cookies?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then there's like
Yeah.
this whole
Yeah.
other,
Yeah.
there's, it's so sneaky. The mind is
So
fascinating.
sneaky. It really is. I can't help it. That the discursive mind, I think the whoever drew the image of the path that we were talking about there, by saying that it's a monkey, I think they got it just right. There, I can't help it. So okay, in the drawing, so can I just show it? Can I put it up?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's great.
I
Great
hope it's
idea.
not too distracting, but I love this drawing. I remember, or this painting rather, is Tonka. I remember somebody teaching it in a meditation class. I think you might have been there for
I
that.
think I remember that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really stuck with me. I had this as a postcard on my wall for a long time. So let me share my screen.
Well,
Okay.
and the monkey is so, like, kind of mischievous, right?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Okay, so can
Yeah.
you see my screen well?
Yes.
Okay, so here in the beginning, the monk is us, right? That's us, the meditator. I won't get into all the symbolism, but look, here's the monkey. That's the discursive mind, or
Yeah.
that's a discursive aspect of mind, and the elephant is the representative of mind itself. And the monk is chasing after a monkey that is leading the elephant around. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. And
Definitely
see how
it.
the elephant there almost has this kind of, like, nervous look,
Yes.
where it's like, what's happening? Oh my gosh, I'm just, like, being carried away
That's
everywhere. Oh my God.
right, right, exactly. And what I
Yeah.
think is so hopeful about this is that, in fact, like what we see in our own experiences along the way, I'll zoom out a bit, but along the way, we notice, like, actually that this is that what the teachers have taught a lot about what the path looks like and what these stages look like, that it begins to resonate. Because in the beginning we did come, and then in fact our monkeys were in fact pulling the elephant around, and it was crazy. It was a circus, like a literal circus, right? But one that was run by the animals themselves. And then just slightly we make it up the path just to the first bend, right? Or right around the first bend, and all of a sudden things start to slow down and transform
Yeah.
just a little bit, right? Yeah, we're still chasing them, but then a little bit later the mind turns towards us, and then at the very end you're riding the elephant and the monkey is hanging out in a tree eating fruit, right?
And
So
look at how beautiful all the symbolism in this is. So, um I like that you use the word hopeful, right? Because you
Yeah.
can see the transformation happening, and not just like in the mind, right? The elephant, where that's kind of things are clearing up, right? There's
Yeah.
also a transformation in the meditator, the monk, where he starts to have more control, I think more confidence.
That's right.
And also in the monkey too, the monkey is starting to come back to his own like kind of, natural colors, and he's willing to come along, right, and be there. And so part of the hopefulness there too is that I think what it's saying is that the monkey quality of the mind is not inherently bad,
Mhm,
right? It
mhm.
just needs to be tamed, like you were saying. We need to find the right way to use the monkey, and I love that it's got a little, it's doing a little bow there. Thank you for showing. This is awesome.
Yeah. I love this image. I find it so, so helpful because it's described as like the nine stages or levels of shamatha practice.
Yeah.
And the reason I said it's hopeful is because even if we are just down the path a little ways, which certainly is the case for me, I can see a little bit of what it's suggesting. I'm like, oh, right. It's not like it was in the beginning. It's a little bit, the elephant has maybe turned a little bit and looked at me, and maybe the monkey isn't, throwing its poop around anymore or something like that. And so I see that, and then I know because there are other people ahead of me on the path and who have done the entire thing. I know that it's like this is possible and I can stick to it. I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think, when talking about Shantideva too, so as we're talking about this path of, the different kind of stages of meditation, he's really encouraging us to take a look at what kind of prevents us from moving along that path. And taking that seriously, taking that as like our job in this life is to kind of determine, okay, what distractions are keeping me
Mhm.
from moving forward on this path. And really, really remembering the dissatisfaction of samsaric pleasures, like you were saying,
That's right.
that as many cookies as we get, we're not going to be satisfied.
That's right.
We're just not going to be satisfied by samsara. So he talks about all different things, whether it be, like sex, even, close relationships, that when we invest all of our happiness into those things, it's we're going to be incredibly disappointed. And like you were saying, it's those things aren't the problem.
No,
It's our fixation on them. It's our investment in them as our sole source of our happiness, versus developing the mind, moving along that path of taming the mind, which,
yeah.
man, if there's anything that I've learned in the last, 5 or 6 years of doing this thing that we're doing with dharma and training and each other, right, is that I am so grateful that I have
Yeah.
this opportunity to work on taming my mind.
Yeah.
Um, like just I can't even put words to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it weird when if we stop just for a moment and reflect on our own training, and we see that we have in fact successfully trained our minds a little bit, there has been some effect. There's deep appreciation and gratitude. Like it's almost like it's like it can kind of get you choked up almost, like where
Yeah.
you're like, I can't believe I'm so fortunate, because I was so lost, right? I was so drowning in all of this delusion and suffering all of this pain from getting wrapped up in all of these material things, right? And not seeing the way things really are, right? Instead, I was operating from this delusional state, and that was hurting me and it was hurting other people. And to see like this, like to recognize like upon reflection how true that is.
Mm.
And yet, like you were saying at the outset of the show, we still can get into somewhat like maybe apathetic
Mhm.
states where we're sort of like, yeah, but I, whatever, like I don't know. What am I
Work.
really, yeah, what am I doing? Oh, it's just
Yeah.
another thing on the to-do list.
Yeah.
Or in my case, sometimes my mind says, well, you have a long time, right? Aren't there many, many lifetimes? Come on, you're a good guy. You're gonna no, no, and this is no joke. This is
I
literally like
know, I'm laughing because I know it.
but yeah, my mind's just like, right? Like, let's just roll with the idea. Like, yeah, so you're as long as you do it, you're a good boy, then you'll get another chance. And so just don't be, real bad, and then you'll get reincarnated. You can try it again in a better life. But
Mm,
no, it's here now, right? In
yeah.
fact, that's the Lojong slogan that we got last week, I believe, or that we've had before, right? Is to reflect upon our special, unique circumstances in having acquired the teacher, the teachings, the community, and the life that supports our training. This is
Yeah.
precious, right?
I just got chills, because it's like, oh my God, wake up. Like, yes,
Wake
that's
up,
what's what.
right?
Yeah. I had a moment of that this morning, where I was doing, just kind of like the prayers,
Yeah.
that I do every morning. And I had this moment where I was like, no, really think about what that means. And it just kind of like broke in me,
Yeah.
like physically, even I could feel it, where it was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm trying to become a Buddha. Like that's a really big deal. Like I'm not just saying like, oh, may I become a Buddha, benefit beings, every being, it's like, no, that's everything. That's
Right.
yeah, what am I doing? I was wondering, like I think with this one, for me as like a layperson, part of my where I get a little bit complacent is that I kind of think like, well, if I really was going to be a good meditator, if I was going to perfect meditation, then I would probably have to be like living in a cave and like
Mm.
just kind of in solitude for the rest of my life, or whatever. These are kind of
Yeah.
like the delusions that I come up with to distract myself. But like, so how as lay people, because I imagine most of the people listening are lay people, like how can we, you know, work on this paramita within the context of living our lives, having to work, having relationships, all the things.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, my sort of reactive answer to that is, on the one hand, anybody can meditate. You don't have to be Buddhist to meditate, and these stages of meditation, oftentimes referred to as jhanas, anybody can actually go through them. Right, like you don't have to be Buddhist to benefit from meditation. What we're talking about is the perfection of meditation, and so I think that what we mean by that is have doing it with a bodhi mind, right? With the bodhicitta intention that we really want to wake up. We want to become enlightened now. We want to be a Buddha now to be of maximum benefit to all beings, right? That's what we're really on about. And I think that's what makes it a paramita, right? Is that sort of intense intention behind it. The other thing I was going to say in response to that about being a layperson, you know, I actually heard that somebody referred to it as somewhat. This is just something that I heard, a childish meditative concentration that has to be separated from
mm,
everybody, right? Has to be physically removed. Has to actually, like, there's nothing wrong. That's good. Retreats are important and all of that, right? Like, I'm not putting that down, but we can actually, as lay people with busy lives, we can set boundaries, and I
yeah,
think that that's
we
really,
have
really important.
to.
You mentioned it at the outset as far as space goes, creating a little bit of space for yourself, creating that kind of a boundary, but we also owe it to ourselves to set time boundaries with other beings in our lives, right? So there's, if we say we're, I mean, there's no way that we're going to get enlightenment, right? There's no, like, we can't kid ourselves. If we can't on a regular basis meditate, if we can't practice on a regular basis, it's not going to happen.
It's
It
not.
just, that's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
And so if we're going to do this, let's be serious about it. And what does that mean? Well, establishing some boundaries. It's okay. Even if you just say, kids, for 6 minutes, you're not going to interrupt me, right? Whatever
Yeah.
that means. And I'm going to be in that space. I'm going to be sitting in the closet for 6 minutes,
Yeah.
right? That's okay. That's
Yeah.
that's appropriate, right? That then minimizes our worldly concerns.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. I along with boundaries, good boundaries, I found that Shanti Davis said the joy of contentment was something that's really important. And he was saying it in the context of living in solitude. Yet I think this absolutely can be applied to our lives as well. So, like finding contentment in what we have,
Yeah,
not constantly seeking more of the eight worldly concerns,
that's right.
which he really lays out in this chapter. And yeah, just living our lives with commitment to our training rather than kind of constant commitment to things that yeah are really unsatisfying. So I liked that. I liked thinking about that in terms of yeah, how we can approach our lives to be more workable towards meditation, um where it's like, okay, part of what I need to do is really subdue like subdue that mind that is constantly seeking.
Yeah.
And so just being at peace with what I already have, I felt was really, really useful.
It's like what Tenzin Choki says, you need to learn to savor the okay, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yes. I
You know,
love
though,
that.
one thing that I'm reading this book by Pema Chodron. It's called "No Time to Lose: A
Mm,
Timely Guide to the Way of the Bodhisattva," which is exactly what we're talking about. And one of the points that she made around this, she said, outer solitude is a support for inner solitude,
mm,
and that the point is not so much that we need to, despite the way that the language appears to us, the Shatideva language appears, the point isn't some type of a complete escape from the worldly life, right?
yeah,
It's just that we tend to get hooked by this stuff, right? By
yeah,
cookies, things like that, right? By sparkly waters and whatnot. And that, like, we just need to be able to free ourselves, even just temporarily, from these distractions, right? Just that's where the boundaries and stuff come in. We just need to free ourselves from the distractions a little bit, take a little bit of a break, right? Because if we don't do that, it's going to be really hard to tame our minds. It's just practical.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think a show that we might want to do coming up soon is like um maybe a little bit of like Dharma depression that I'm
Oh,
getting,
oh yeah.
where I think when we do start to look at like all these distractions and really take into account like how, yeah, just how unsatisfying they are. At least I've noticed for myself, I don't know anyone else, I'm feeling a little bit depressed. And
Yeah.
so I'd love to talk about that sometime, where it's like, okay, as we, continue on this path and things that we used to do to like try and help our, our suffering in the moment, are not really working the way they used to. And that
Oh, I want to give you some.
it burns a little.
It does. It does. It does. Would you say that you're nauseous with this? Because I want to read a little line. I think this is hopeful. Um, let's see here. Nausea with doing the same thing over and over is called wholesome disillusion.
All
So
right.
maybe it's not Dharma depression, but perhaps it's wholesome disillusion because it motivates us to break our habits, right? And
Great reframe.
right, and so I think that, like, it really is just that. I mean, that our obsession, our getting hooked, is what creates the veil in the first place that you were
Yeah.
referring to. you know and so when that veil is firmly in place, that wholesome disillusion goes away,
Yeah.
right? And we are just, oh, life is good. Oh, it's so nice, right? I got cookies
Yeah.
and candy and people who love me and sex on a regular basis and money and fame, and oh, it's all good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where our wholesome disillusion disappears. So
Yeah.
I think maybe a little Dharma depression is not such a bad thing.
Nice. Okay, great. Well, that's really helpful. And yeah, I think a wonderful ending to this discussion on the perfection of meditation, that Okay, a little bit of wholesome disillusion is
That's
gonna
right.
start emerging as we
Oh
perfect
yeah,
paramita. Yeah,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
to invite
let's
it.
roll with it. Let's get
Let's invite it. Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
bring on that
Yeah,
disillusionment. Hell
that's
yeah.
right. I totally want to be just I want nausea, right?
Yes.
Give me some of that, right? Like that'll motivate me. Like I want to have it perfected by next week.
Yeah, okay, great. Let's check in next week about
That
it.
way we can talk about the paramita of wisdom from a point of view of experience.
Hell yeah. All right. Well,
We got a week to do this, Jack.
got a week to perfect meditation. Okay, I think it's not gonna happen for me, but I'm gonna work on it. I'm gonna work on it as hard as I can.
All right. I'll let you know what it looks like when we get here.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. This was lovely. I really
Yep.
appreciate you. And thank you
Same.
to everyone who is listening. We love you. Please donate if you feel called to do so on the Lions Roar dharmacenter.org website. We'd really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you, everybody who's listening. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.